Welcome to the Damn Strong podcast. I'm your host, Bree, and I'm a full-time online fitness coach, and my passion is to educate women on all things fitness. I help women just like you step into the power of knowledge and commitment to ultimately live your best and strongest life. In this podcast, we'll talk about being damn strong in our body, mind, and life. I'll be teaching you how to navigate nutrition, strength training, and mindset challenges. So get ready to take some notes because we're building a damn strong life. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Bree, and this is the Damn Strong podcast. This is going to be a coach's episode. So if you're someone who's not a coach, I still think you could probably gain value from this episode. But I'm really going to be diving into I would say this is not your typical coaches episode. I've done a coaches episode before with Alex. We did one kind of going over, there might be a few things in this that I talk about that I did talk about in that episode. I can't remember. I didn't go back and look at it, but it's less about like the systems, what we use for applications, what we use to put our clients for their workout programs. This is more of kind of like how you coach your clients and things that I've learned over the years, things I've helped other coaches with, a few of my clients are actually coaches, and something that I do with my clients that are coaches is like, we'll talk about their clients and talk about what they're going through and talk through, okay, this client's been doing this, and here's my solution. Do you have any thoughts on that? So I love helping other coaches figure out like, okay, what's another perspective you can take on this? Or have you considered this with your client and all of those different things. So I have 5 things listed. I could get into other ones. Maybe we'll go on some rabbit trails, but we'll see. So my first one is I'm just going to start off with probably my most important one that I find with coaches when I'm talking to them about their clients. And the first thing I want you to do as a coach is to step into your authority. And what I mean by that is I feel like a lot of times coaches will get like this imposter syndrome. Totally normal. You're just like, something happens that makes you second guess yourself. You're not sure, but I want you to start stepping into your authority and your power as a coach, right? The reason this client is coming to you is because you know more than him. Automatically, if you are coaching someone of the general population, you already know more than they do, right? And so I really want you to step into your authority, into your power. And the reason why I thought this up is with working with previous clients who've been coaches, they'll ask me questions and they'll screenshot their texts from, in between them and their clients. And they do a lot of like, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that with their clients, which I don't think is wrong. I think it's totally fine to be asking your clients if they want to do X, Y, or Z. But there's a difference between finding a compromise with your client and letting your client kind of drive your coaching program, right? Like if you hired an accountant, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I work for myself. I'm an accountant. If my accountant was like, do you want to file your taxes? Do you want to file, a 1099? Do you want to file your franchise tax? Like if that's how he approached me and things, I'd be like, I don't know. Well, do I need to, right? Like I do look to him as an authority. Like I want him to be like, look, we need to file your taxes by this, and this date. You have two options. We could pay your taxes quarterly. We could pay your taxes yearly. He'll provide me with some options of like, this is what needs to happen, but here are some options. And I may be like, okay, well, what's the benefit of paying it quarterly versus yearly on my taxes? And he'll explain those things. So I look to my accountant as an authority, and I want you to step into your coaching in that same way. When your client is, struggling with, maybe being compliant on the weekends or just tracking or whatever it is, I want you to discuss with your client saying, hey, it's totally fine for you to ask questions. I'm not here saying, don't ask your client questions, but let's say like your client is having a really hard time of hitting their step goal. Instead of being like, well, do you want to go outside and walk? Do you want to get a walking pad? You're being like, hey, you know what? You've really struggled with your step goal. Let's find a solution. Here are some. What if we went and walked in the morning? Is that a possibility? If their client's like, well, no, I get up at 4 a.m. to work out and I have to get my kids ready. It's like, okay, mornings is an option. What about the afternoon? Tell me about your afternoons. And then they explain it to you. And so you're like you're helping them to piece together and go through what would be the best solution, but with an authority, right? You're saying we got to get our steps done. Right? This is a non-negotiable. We're going to get our steps done. Now, there's a discussion of like, do we need to lower them? Is it unattainable? Do we set your step goal too high? Is it possible? Is it the client is just not using their time wisely and they have a time management problem? But you're going to find a solution. Like, for example, I had a client who are her last check-in, she was like, I'm really struggling to get my step goal. I'm like, okay, well, you don't work remote. She told me on her check-in that she parks as far as possible from the grocery store. She parks as far as possible from the gym. Like, she's doing all these little things. She gets up and she takes the long route to go to the bathroom. Like, she's doing all these little things that she possibly can throughout the day, but she's still struggling to hit her step goal. I'm like, okay, well, you don't work remote. You work at you go physically into work. So you're already maximizing your amount of steps. Like, if you, your lunch break, if you can, you're getting your steps in. That might not always be possible with your lunch breaks per the type of job that she works, but she is maximizing her steps from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Let's say those are her hours, right? So we only have before 8 a.m. and after 5 p.m. I told her, like, okay, let's talk about your mornings. What do your mornings look like? What do your evenings look like? And we just kind of have to pick which is going to be less worse in a way. It's because either way, she's gonna have to get up early to get her steps in, or she is, when she comes home from work and she's probably tired and just wants to sit on the couch, she's having to make it a priority to go for her walks. I was like, look, we got two options. Let's discuss which are the better ones. So I came to her in this, I'm gonna say like authority way, but it's just like, look, okay, this is your situation. This is what's going on here. Here are two options. Now let's discuss through this, and showing her where her option may be versus like, okay, well, do you want to try and get steps in at lunch? Do you want to get up earlier? It's like, look, we're going to have to get up earlier, or we're going to have to do this after work. And we've got to figure out which is the better option for you. I want to make sure that no one's taking this as like I'm being like a dictator towards her or not. It's like, no, like I'm being realistic with her and be like, okay, you're struggling to hit your steps. We've only got two options. If I'm just being realistic with my client, right? And now through conversation, we can decide, okay, what makes sense? If she was like, Brie, I already get up at 4 a.m. because I have to take care of my parents and I have to cook and I have to do this and I have to get my siblings off to school. And then when I come home, I have to actually pick up my siblings from daycare, and then I have to, take care of my parents, help them get to bed. And maybe she's a caregiver or something like that. I can't do either. Then I'd be like, all right, we need to make a different step goal. Like, we need to be more realistic about this. Maybe we look at the weekends, right? So have these discussions with your clients with that authority that they're coming for you too. Okay, the next one I actually kind of talked a little bit about in the last point, but ask questions, don't assume. Something that I found that I quickly fixed in my coaching is that I would assume things with my clients instead of asking because I may felt annoying or I didn't want to maybe offend them. I don't know why some of these things I thought would be offensive by asking them these questions, but I just didn't want to annoy my clients. And so for like a great example would be like, as I would, I check my clients' logs when they're tracking just to make sure everything looks good. They screenshot their logs, they text those over to me. I look through them, and there'd be times where I'd see them having like chicken and like broccoli and rice, like, this really great, nutritious, high protein dinner. And I'm like, I don't see any oil tracked. Like, it's very, I would really assume that when she made her broccoli, when she made her chicken, she probably cooked with oil, but like, she knows, like, she's supposed to be tracking everything. Like, she wouldn't have missed that. And then I find out 4 weeks down the line, she hasn't been tracking olive oil, and she's been adding an extra 400 calories to her day because she hasn't been tracking olive oil. And that's on me because I just assumed that she knew to track olive oil. And I don't think that she didn't know to track it. She just wasn't thinking about it. It wasn't something that came to her mind, right? Or another assumption that I made early in my coaching career was, I have all my clients use a food scale. I don't want them using tablespoons, cups, because it makes tracking less accurate. So I have them all do on a food scale. And I have clients who send me screenshots, and it'd be like a cup of berries, a cup of apples, a cup of rice, a fourth a cup of this. And I'm like, probably what this client is doing is she's looking at the nutrition label. She sees that 28 grams is a fourth of a cup. And so she's weighing out 28 grams on the scale, and then she's tracking the fourth of a cup. Like, she knows to weigh everything out in grams. We talked about that. We went over that. Come to find out 4 weeks later, she's been using cups and tablespoons the entire time. And so you just don't assume things with your clients. Don't feel bad about re-asking them questions, because there'll be clients who will send me their logs and I won't see any oil tracked their chicken. They're like, oh yeah, I got some pre-made chicken at the store, so I didn't cook with any oil. I'm like, awesome. And the next time they send it and I see there's a chicken, there's no oil, I will just double, triple check and ask them. And previous me, earlier me, 3 years ago me, felt really bad asking them more than once, because to me, I felt like I was making them feel stupid, because they might be like, oh, Bree's asked me this before. She knows I know to track oil if I use oil. But I can't assume that, because I've had those other experiences with clients where they're not tracking oil. Or again, if I see a client track mayo and tablespoons. You know what I mean? I clarify with them saying, hey, I see this track in tablespoons. Did you measure this out with a scale or did you use tablespoons? They're like, oh no, I definitely measured that with scale. I say, hey, you know what? Just so that way I can make sure I know that you're not using tablespoons in the future, will you put the gram measurement instead of the tablespoon measurement, right? So make sure with your clients, you're not just assuming they know what to do, that they're assuming that even though you went over it 4 different times with them, just if it says in your gut that you want to double check that they're doing something, just double check. And if you're really nervous, again, like me, I don't know if this is unique to me. I don't know if anyone else feels this way, to be honest, but if you feel like you've asked your client something a million times, say that. Say, I'm so sorry. I know I've asked you this a million times, but as your coach, I need to make sure I'm doing my job and doing my due diligence and just double checking. At the end of the day, your job as a coach is to problem solve, right? And so part of problem solving is your client brings you the problem and you help them problem solve, right? But the other times it's being able to look through their logs, to them to send you their forum videos and to be able to find quote unquote that problem and help them fix that. All right, next one. Remember, you can't make your clients want it. This is one that I struggled with for probably the longest out of anything with being a coach is if anyone knows Enneagrams, I am an Enneagram 2, which is the helper. And so when I struggle with not feeling like I'm doing enough for clients, right? And so when I have a client who is ghosting me, not showing up to calls, not replying to my text, I'm like, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Like I wasn't doing enough. Like I wasn't replying to her text fast enough. I didn't make sure this was set up. You know what? I should have texted her before we had our call. That's why she didn't show up to the call. That's my bad because I didn't text her before to make sure she showed up. And I had to sit down with myself and be like, look, Brie, you are in this constant spiral of guilt all the time for these clients who aren't showing up for themselves. You have to recognize you can't make your clients want it. And so something I had to do with myself is create a checklist, because in your coaching career, it is impossible to not come across a client who is going to ghost you, who is not going to show up for the calls, who is going to not even do the bare minimum that you need for yourself as a coach. And so for myself, I set up like little checklists for myself of like, okay, what do I need to make sure how do I know I'm bringing 110% to the table? Because this is the thing with coaching. I think a lot of people just believe that once they hire a coach, it's going to fix their accountability problems. It's going to fix their tracking problems. They're never going to not track over the weekends. Like that, just hiring a coach solves all these problems. And yes, having a coach can be helpful in solving those problems, right? If you have a coach, you're more likely to be accountable. If you have a coach, you're more likely to track over the weekends. If you have a coach, you're definitely going to be able to track more accurately because they'll help you with that. But simply hiring a coach doesn't solve all those problems. I think a lot of people look towards coaching to solve that problem, and they start coaching with you and you text them and you're trying to get information from them and they don't text you back. Or you require, hey, fill out this check-in form, once a week, and then we'll hop on a call, and they don't show up the call. They don't fill out the check-in form. You have to have something for yourself as a coach where you're like, okay, what do I require of myself to say, hey, I showed up to the relationship? It almost kind of pertains with any relationship, right? A friendship, a spouse, a significant other. You're like, okay, what do I need to make sure? Let me make sure that I'm showing up 100%. Let's make sure that I'm not the problem. And to make sure I'm not the problem, I have this mental checklist. Like, okay, if a client's not texting me, I'm going to text them back. I'm not going to bombard them with text. I'm going to follow up every other day. So I'll text them on Monday. If I don't get a reply by Wednesday, I'll send another text. If I don't get a reply by Wednesday, I'll follow up by Friday. If I don't get a follow up on text, I might shoot them an email or something like that. And so I have like a few checklists. And at some point, like you only can reach out so many times. And then I have a mental checklist of like, okay, I did everything. I reached out to them 3 times via text. I reached out to them twice via email. I'm having no response. I can't feel guilty about that, right? Or at bare minimum, what I need from a client is I need them to submit their check-ins, right? I need them to fill out their data sheet. I have a data sheet for my clients to fill out. And so if a client isn't completing their check-in and they're not filling out their data sheet, I can't feel bad for them not making their progress because I don't have the information to help them, right? And so I felt a lot of guilt at the beginning of my journey as being a coach, but I wouldn't say quickly. I feel like I dealt with this for a really long time, but I eventually had to be like, look, Brie, you are just sitting in this guilt all the time with clients who aren't even showing up all the way. You know what I mean? I don't need a client to be perfect. I tell my clients this all the time. If you were perfect, you wouldn't need me as a coach. I don't require and I don't expect perfect, but I do expect a bare minimum. I do expect you to text me back at least within 24 hours. If you can't, if something really traumatic is going on, just saying, hey, I can't reply right now, I'll text you next week or whatever it is. But just like bare minimum communication, filling out your check-in form weekly, filling out your data sheet, and then communicating with me. Like I have a bare minimum requirement, and I'm just like, I can't feel guilty if a client's not even doing the bare minimum for me to help them, And so if you're a coach that struggles with feeling that guilt, like you're not doing enough for your clients, and especially for the ones who aren't showing up, I need you to set yourself like a little checklist of like, okay, if the client is, doing XYZ, what do I feel like I need to do to know that I did everything I could? I did everything I could to lead them to water. I put the harness on. I put right. I'm talking about a horse. If anyone's not catching on to that, but like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And so make sure you're doing everything to lead the horse to water. You put on the harness. You're putting on the rope. You're walking forward. You're pulling. You're tugging. But obviously, don't pull and tug too hard to your clients because you don't want to. You want to push people, but obviously not push someone so far that like they hate you, right? But you only can do so much, you know what I mean? And then you can even get your client to walk. You can get the horse to walk to water, but then when they have water in front of them, they'll refuse to drink. And so you have to be like, okay, I did everything I could. I like I said 2 seconds ago, put the harness on, put the rope on. I got them to move forward. I guided them how to get to the water trough, and they're sitting in front of it and they still won't drink. I've done everything I can. So I feel like I said this 100 times. I'm just going to say it again. Make yourself a little bit of a list. If it's not even a mental list, if you don't even know what to put on that list, as you have come across those clients and you have a client that she does great at filling out her check-in. She does great at filling out her data sheet, but she doesn't respond to you via text. One, approach that client saying, hey, thank you so much for, and this actually goes into, is it the next point? Yeah, it actually goes to the next point, which I'll talk about. But like, hey, thank you so much for filling out your check-ins, doing all this. I need more communication between you and I am, for me to make sure I do my job and make, this investment worth it, I need you to respond to me at least within 24 hours. Is that something that you can do? If they can't, okay, then we need to figure out a system that's going to work here. If they can, awesome. And then if they still don't do it, you've not only done everything you can, you've also asked that of your client. Like I don't have much more I can do here, So, okay, next one is be supportive, but be honest. And this is kind of what I was starting to do at that last part of the last point is learn how to make a compliment sandwich when it comes to your client. So what I mean by that is if a client sends you a form video, instead of immediately going to everything they're doing wrong, I want you to first compliment them. And you don't even have to make it a sandwich. I would just always start with complimenting your client and telling them what they're doing really well. Now, there are times where I don't, and I just go straight into like, we need to fix this, this, and this, and this. Absolutely. But if a client sends me a form video, like RDLs, for example, and, there's a few things they're doing wrong, I first try to always go into what they're doing great. I love your range of motion. I love how you keep a neutral spine. I love how you keep your neck down. But next time when you do these, I want you to keep the dumbbells closer to your thighs. And I want you to keep that more center of gravity, engage your lats, and then walk through the things that I need to change because it feels really good. I feel like especially for people who have never been in the gym or people who have never received critiquing on their form, it's really nice to hear like, okay, I do know something. I do know how to perform this well. There's just a few tweaks, but like I'm doing all of these things really, really well. So when you correct something with your client, either a compliment sandwich of like, hey, you do these really, really well. Let's tweak these. But I also really love this, where you can do a compliment, critique, compliment, again, make it a sandwich. Or I guess you could call it like a compliment tostada, right? There's only 2 parts to tostada. Like start with the nice, yummy, like chicken and beans and all the stuff you put on tostada and then serve them the corn tortilla of like what needs to be fixed. Or like an open face sandwich. I don't know, however you want to visualize this, but I would always try to start with a compliment, even with their tracking, right? I'll have clients who will send me their tracking stuff and I'll be like, everything looks really great. Love how easy it was to hit our protein goal. Blah, 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 blah. Did we track oil here? Like, was oil considered? Hey, on your salad, was there dressing? Now, there's definitely times where I don't do that every time, right? If a client's been with me for like a period of time, I don't need to technically gas them up every single time they send me their logs. Might be like, hey, just want to double check. I see that for this meal, you went out to In-N-Out. Did you make sure you tracked for your ketchup? Because I don't see ketchup here. I see fries, I see a burger, but I don't see ketchup. They're like, oh no, I totally forgot. And I don't find that need because they know what they do, right? They know how to do things. It's just a little critiquing, but try to do when you can. Start with a compliment and then go into the critiquing that you have. I think it just feels a lot better for human beings in general. If you start, it's kind of like kids, not to like take a client and be like, you're treating them like a 2-year-old. But when you're teaching your kid like how to draw or how to write, or like they're learning shapes or colors, you're like, good job. Okay, next time, let's do it this way, right? It feels good to have that compliment first. So, okay, last one that I have here is be honest in your knowledge. And what I mean by that is if you don't know something, tell your client that. Don't try and like bullshit your way through some answer. Clients really, really, really respect that. I personally really respect that. If I ask my accountant a question, he's like, you know what? This is what I'm pretty sure the answer is, but some things have been changed recently, or maybe he knows the answer, but he's like, let me just double, triple check that for you to make sure that nothing has changed as far as the laws or whatever, and I'll get back to you. Wow, what a great accountant, right? So you telling someone that you don't know, I think actually does the opposite of what people think. I think when people admit they don't have a certain knowledge to their client, it makes them feel like to their client that their client's viewing them as like, oh, well, they're not a pro. They don't know this. No, I don't think it views it that way at all. I think it shows that you're actually taking the time to make sure you give them quality information. Or it even could be, admitting that it's not in your wheelhouse. I have some clients who have injuries, right? And they'll be like, hey, my knee is like literally yesterday, I had a client who we are working on just squats, like body weight squats. And she's not getting as far down as I believe that she can. And I go, can we get lower? And she goes, the problem is when I get all the way down, the next day my knee is killing me. And I'm like, have we gone to a physical therapist to get this checked out? She's like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, first of all, pain, I can teach you good form on stuff to avoid getting injured. When it comes to you actually getting injured, that is not my specialty. That is outside of my realm of knowledge. One, we're going to go see a PT. Okay. If you're not from the States, I'm going to talk about insurance for a second here. If it doesn't cover your insurance, something like that, I totally understand. Like that's a reasonable thing to be concerned with. But like, why have we not gotten this checked out yet? Oh, I've just been really busy, blah, 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 blah. Totally understand. We are now officially going to set aside time for you to go to a PT. I want you to get this checked out because the last thing that I want is for you to not get this checked out. And it gets worse and worse and worse and worse as you get older. And you are actually able to squat less and less and less down because you didn't go to get checked out. And now you can't sit your own ass on the toilet at 67 years old because you never went and got it checked out. Right. So it's like now that going to get your knee checked out seems so much smaller than it actually is. Like it doesn't seem as much time commitment when you think about the repercussions of not getting checked out. Right. And I know I'm kind of going to a different topic here, but all of this to say, if something is not my wheelhouse, it's not my specialty, it's outside of my profession, I always let a client know. And I always try to recommend them where to possibly go to. So pain is one of them, specific nutritional needs for maybe like a certain disease or a certain illness or whatever it may be. Yes, I have a general understanding of like nutrition, but some specific disease that you require specific nutritional protocols for that is outside my wheelhouse. You know what I mean? So making sure that you're just honest in your knowledge in the first point that I gave, if you don't know something, letting your client know and then doing that proper, like, let me investigate, let me figure this out. And then if it's outside your wheelhouse, again, being honest in that your knowledge is limited and you would recommend outward. I've recommended plenty of clients to PTs and going to get that stuff checked out for injuries or whatever it may be. I've also, to be completely honest, I've had some clients where a big part of my coaching is helping women define food freedom. But there is a point where someone actually needs to go to therapy and needs to see a food therapist. And it's beyond what I can help them with because there are some deeper issues that we've been trying to, come over the hurdle with or trying to push through. And it's either when we're chatting or talking, it's going over their heads or just like some really deep emotional stuff is coming up. And I'm like, look, this is beyond my scope of practice. So and your client will always respect that. And I think I don't know this for sure, but I think we'll always remember that. Remember that like you weren't just like a bill to be paid. They weren't just a number that you actually truly cared about. At the end of the day, what I care about the most is my client's health. And that means that they stop working with me and they go and seek out a food therapist. That's what needs to happen. So that was a very like long-winded answer for being honest in your knowledge, but hopefully that gives you a little insight into I don't know, things that I've gone through, things I've dealt with as a coach. All right, guys, that is the end of today's episode. If you are a coach and you loved this episode, a free way to support the show is to screenshot and share on your stories. If you have any additional questions or like a follow-up or just like, oh, wow, something in here like really started a thought process and you have more questions on, shoot me a DM. I get back to all of my DMs. So shoot me a message and I'll be happy to chat with you in the DMs. But if you have anything else, any other feedback, be sure to just DM me about that and I will catch you guys on the next episode. Bye, guys. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Damn Strong Podcast. Show me some love by leaving a review and sharing a screenshot of this episode on your Instagram stories. Until next time, stay strong.